Good morning, Athens, and welcome to Education Matters, the official voice of youth. Education Matters is sponsored by the Clark County School District. Better Together, the Clark County School District. Ellison's Professional Services, when you get your income taxes done this year, go with who you know, Ellison's Professional Services, and your local internet station, MIU Radio Athens. Check it out at miuradioathens.com. My name is Fadrell Green, and joining me are my co-hosts,
Ethan McKenzie.
and Fallon Green. Today on Education Matters, we will be discussing the Juneteenth Committee's plan for the 19-day celebration in Athens with our guests, Dr. Frida Giles and Sayla Gardner. But before we start today's show, we will give our words to grow on. Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world. By Harriet Tubman. How are you two doing today?
Oh, just fine. We managed to get here through the pouring rain. So
That's
Hi.
good to hear.
Thank you for having us.
thank you. Yes.
My first question for the two of you ladies is, and either one of you can respond, what exactly is this Juneteenth Committee and what is its goal right now?
So go ahead.
Sure. So the Juneteenth group that we've formulated is with ACC Gov staff, Leisure Services and Inclusion Office, and community stakeholders, members of our community. We've kind of come together so that we can collaboratively work towards creating a Juneteenth celebration that is led by our community and created for the community.
As you know, this is the first year that Juneteenth is a federal holiday. So we want to make it start out as auspiciously and as expansively as we can. So Athens Clark County has given us a budget to work with, and we are now seeking people who have planned celebrations so that we can publish a calendar from June 1st all the way through Juneteenth of activities and things that people can go to. So we're in the process of doing that now.
Oh, so this the first time y'all done this before?
Yeah, this is the first time that Juneteenth is a federal holiday. So we're gonna try to do it up and get started. Just like many years ago, long before you were born, I was around when Martin Luther King Day became a holiday. And it was celebrated all over the country. There were activities, there were celebrations, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot going on for Juneteenth.
But what I'd like to clear up though is what exactly, how long has this committee been in organization? Like, is this the first year it's been around, or, because I've been getting some mixed messages saying that y'all started last year. Is this the first year y'all have come together?
So,
Go ahead.
Sorry. So last year, there was an initial Juneteenth celebration that was done with Leisure Services and the Inclusion Office. And that, I would say, was how we were able to kind of formulate this group by what we learned and what we did last year. The Mayor Commission has allocated this funding, and the purpose of it was intended so that this could be a community-led celebration. We know that there's been tons of Juneteenth localized events that have been taking place for years now. And so I think this, while we did have a celebration last year where we incorporated Gospel Pilgrim Cemetery and a cleanup that was done there, we did a community celebration across the street at the Springfield Baptist Church, and we had EADC helping as a partner with that, and Rashi's food truck was there, Little Ice Cream Dude. We want to expand on that initial celebration, and this, I would say, yes, is the first year, although we did some celebratory events last year. This year is the first year that we have kind of formed a group that is collaborative with ACC staff and with the community so that we are cohesively together leading the charge, and ACC, I think, is here as support for however the community sees the plans laid out for the 19 days of Juneteenth.
And I like how you mentioned a 19-day celebration. Like, what's involved during those 19 days?
We have a number of things that we hope will happen. Right now, we're waiting to hear from people as to what they're planning. And we published a website where they can go and they give us 2 dates, a primary date and an alternate date, so that we can spread out the activities over the 19 days. And we have a few that have come in, but March 15th is the deadline. So we're hoping that by that time, a number of people will have come in and told us what they intend to do.
I'm reading a list of the members of this year's committee, and you've got a lot of big name contributors to the community on this list. I'll go through some of them. You have yourself, Dr. Giles, Asia Thomas, who we interviewed a couple months back, Lemuel Life LaRoche, our CEO, Rick Dunn. How were you able to get all these people to come together? Like, what, can I get an answer from you as a member of the board, how you were able to get these people together?
Well, I'm so excited about this federal holiday and how we can bring to the fore all of the glories of our history, that when they asked me, I just said, oh yes, right away. And I'm sure the other people did too, because this is such a meaningful event. And we're always thinking in terms of the future. You guys are our future. We want you to be well prepared to take us into the next phase of our future. And by knowing your background, your history, knowing of all the wonderful things that have been done so that you could grow and achieve and go forward, I think we all were just excited about being a part of it.
What exactly are some of the contributions, or what are some of the ways, other than what you've been doing here, coming on the show to talk about Juneteenth? Is this the first form of promotion for it, or what are some other ways you've been trying to do this?
Yeah, it really is actually. We've created some marketing materials, and we have some posters, some postcards, rack cards, and on each of those there is a QR code, and that QR code takes folks to the survey. And really right now we're in the pre-planning stages because we want our community to go to the survey and fill that out with their ideas. We want anyone who has an event or a program that they'd like to see happen during the 19 days of Juneteenth to fill that out. And we are helping as the planning committee and as ACC Go staff to help anyone who has an idea and wants to see it come to fruition, to support them, whether it's through, supplies or through financial means or just through promotion or a space. Like I said earlier, I think that we want the planning committee to kind of drive the bus and the community to give us their ideas on what they want these 19 days to look like. And then ACC Gov is functioning as we're paying for the gas and kind of supporting it as it moves forward, because there's going to be, as folks come to the table, we don't have a ton of submissions yet, but I think that, I know Joy Village, Laura Smothers is one of the co-chairs of this committee, and so she's trying to plan a Juneteenth camp, but that involves, operational cost and staffing and things like that. So we're trying to help our community host these events, and I think the committee has kind of come up with, there's values associated to what we're really hoping to see: an educational component, a celebratory component, commemorative component, and there's lots of different ways that anyone in our community can really kind of send us their idea, and we want to be able to make as many of those events come to life.
I know. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, yes, if anyone has questions or wants to contact us, they should email at athensjuneteenth@gmail.com. And I'll probably mention that later in the show, but it's athensjuneteenth@gmail.com. and Selah and her wonderful staff will help to figure out what they can contribute.
I'm reading on the website that you have for the Juneteenth celebration. It mentions that the pandemic has kind of been a wrench in a lot of the planning. What exactly, like, can you go into detail on what are some things that it's done to make that make planning an issue?
So I think for this year, if we're talking in terms of the 22, I mean, remaining hopeful that maybe by the time that the 19 days rolls around, we're situated a little differently with the pandemic. I will say that for the initial planning that started last year, that definitely threw a wrench in a larger celebration, and it kind of kept it smaller scale, but I think helped us really kind of listen and meet folks in the community who wanted to be a part of this planning committee, and really build something out that felt a little more collaborative.
Right, the pandemic did put a damper on a lot of plans for people to celebrate. And so we're hoping that those people who didn't have an opportunity in the past to do something will be able to do so.
Thank you, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Education Matters, the official voice of the youth. My name is Fredrell Green, and joining me are my co-hosts,
Ethan McKenzie.
Fallon Green. Before we continue today's show, we will have Fallon Green with our To Your Health.
To Your Health is sponsored by Drug Free Athens. Between 2000 and 2015, the average global life expectancy increased by 5 years.
Drug Free Athens.
This has been To Your Health, sponsored by Drug Free Athens.
Thank you, Fallon.
Okay, Dr. Giles and Ms. Gardner, I have a question for y'all. So for people and myself too, what is Juneteenth?
Good question. Let's start in May, because for Athens, Georgia, May 4th is what they call Jubilee Day. And that's the day the Union Army came to Athens and let the enslaved people know that they had been freed. And the enslaved people marched down to the city hall and rang the bell and had a celebration of freedom. But not everyone found out at the same time that slavery was ended. And so by the time the troops got to Texas, the enslaved people there were not informed until June 19th and thereabouts. So Juneteenth became the holiday, or the day of commemoration of the end of chattel slavery in the United States.
Tell me about that word you used to describe Juneteenth, Jubilee Day. What meaning is there behind that?
Well, Jubilee is a celebration, or it's a day of joy. And when the enslaved persons found out that they were finally free, of course, we know that 1863 was the date the Emancipation Proclamation came into effect. But it took the end of the Civil War to get people freed from enslavement to the extent that they could leave the plantation and start to form their own destinies. And of course, the knowledge of that. And you know that in about 12 years after the Civil War, there was a lot of possibility. The troops were still in the South, so African Americans could start to build their own futures. Unfortunately, that was cut off in 1877 when the troops were withdrawn from the South. But Juneteenth has always been celebrated. It started in Texas, and it spread over the United States as just a day to mark this is the end of legal chattel slavery.
What does the fact that Juneteenth is now recognized as a federal holiday, what meaning does that pose to you as a African American?
Well, I think it's meaningful to acknowledge we seem to be living in a time where there's a faction of people trying to prevent acknowledgement of the past and the true history of the past. And this, I think, is a step in a better direction of saying, let's look at the past, let's acknowledge the past, let's look at the past and the possibilities for the future. And I think that's what Juneteenth means to me. We plan to have educational lectures. We're hoping for celebrations of, when I lived in New York City, we would have a picnic at Grant's Tomb, which is a area in New York City, Upper Manhattan. And just to say, let's get together and think about and talk about what this day means and how we can acknowledge what it took to get to this day.
Ms. Gardner, we haven't had a chance to hear you talk. What does Juneteenth mean to you?
So I will say last year we did a series at the Morton Theater where we invited Mr. Fred Smith, Mr. Rick Dunn, Miss Michelle Pearson-Tucker, and Dr. Giles. Did you speak with us last year? Oh, Miss Linda Davis. And I think for myself, hearing those stories about, I did not know about May 4th and Jubilee Day, and I learned that from Mr. Fred Smith last year. And hearing about Juneteenth, I think in recent times, it hadn't quite sunk in the way that it did for me last year when I heard our local history around the May 4th Jubilee Day, and to really think, this isn't something I don't think that is as widely understood as it should be. I mean, we celebrate 4th of July and everybody knows 4th of July, but when you think about what the facts of how our country was built on enslaved persons and how representative that day is for, as Dr. Giles said, I mean, really being able to see a future for yourself and not what someone else is forcing you to do. I think, last year when hearing the stories about the history, really, it affected me deeply. And to go into Gospel Pilgrim and, see the gravesite of Pink Morton and his family, and to learn about his legacy, I think there's still so much to learn, but it is really important that it's not necessarily just about education. It's about hearing the stories, learning about what the past holds, but also what the future can bring to the day, and to make it. I think I'm excited that you're here and you're young, and that this will be something that young people can also take and make it into a celebration that feels representative and really celebratory, because I think it is a celebration for all of us to recognize what that day really means.
Yeah, and I am very glad that y'all are doing it, because I think there's a lot of misinformation too. People think that the Emancipation Proclamation freed all the slaves, but it only freed the slaves in the South, not the slaves in the North.
Well, enslavement in the North had a lot of different dates as far as emancipation, but the thing about Lincoln was trying to disable the South, and so by writing and getting the Emancipation Proclamation, yes, it came into effect on January 1st, 1863, but the war was still going on. So, of course, the enslaved people were not going to be actually liberated or freed until the war ended in 1865. So the whole Jubilee Day, Juneteenth, that goes back to 1865. But in the different states in the North, for example, New York, where I come from, manumission was 1827. So there's different dates. But one reason why there was a Civil War is because the slave owners or slave holders wanted to expand the reach of slavery throughout the entire nation so that slaves who escaped, there would be no escape in the United States, that it would be everywhere, and they would be property everywhere. And so in order to defend that, that's why we had a war.
Going back to what you said about Abraham Lincoln, I would like to get your thoughts on what you believe as a historian, what Abraham Lincoln's true intentions were. You mentioned that he wanted to disable the South. A lot of people who only read the surface level stuff about Abe Lincoln, they believe that his intentions was to truly, free the slaves. But if you read more into it, it was kind of more of like a strategy to help win the war, to preserve the Union. What are your thoughts on Abraham Lincoln as a figure?
Well, I think he was the right person for that time because he got the war won. And he fought through, because at the beginning, it didn't look good. But he was determined to keep the United States together and not have a separate nation in the South. So I admire what he did in that sense. And there's a lot to admire about what he did, but he was kind of ambivalent, in my opinion, towards us, towards African Americans. On the one hand, he believed that enslavement was wrong, but he was also believing that we should be shipped back to Africa, even though most, by that time, so many generations had gone by. Shipped to Africa, what did that mean? That was just as foreign to the enslaved people as it was to the white people. So through at that time, it's kind of ironic, it was the Republican Party that was the radicals. So through that time, there were a lot of people in the Republican Party who said, no, we're going to free the enslaved people, and we are going to make this work as a nation where African Americans could be free. So I think Lincoln stepped up to the plate, did what he had to do, got the war won, and by the time the war was over, he had kind of warmed to the idea of African Americans as citizens. In his second inauguration speech, he even kind of hinted at that, and that was his death warrant. Mm-hmm. So I think he showed a lot of courage in even thinking that he was kind of changing more in the direction of full citizenship.
So in a way, the war was kind of like a learning experience for Lincoln himself, mm-hmm. to truly grasp how important it was to interconnect, those who were enslaved and those who had the power to free them.
I believe so. I believe he became more of a believer as time went on, especially seeing the courage of the African American troops who, in droves, signed up to fight this war and were very, very integral to the success of keeping the Union together.
You mentioned something about how back then the Republicans were the radicals, mm-hmm. and the Democrats, they were the ones to, be pro-slavery. It's kind of hard to believe that for some people when you look at where they are now. Where do you think that changed?
Oh, well, when Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act in 1965, that's when things began to change, because the Dixiecrats, which were Democrats of the South, the white Democrats, started leaving the Democratic Party and going over to the Republican Party. And going over to the Republican Party, then you have like a critical mass of not progressive. I want to say what I really think, but people who were the opposite of progressive. And it grew from there. So I would trace it back to the signing of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act in the 1960s.
Thank you. I will be right back after these messages.
Sure, I'm glad.
Welcome back to Education Matters. We are here with Miss Sella Gardner and Dr. Frida Giles.
Miss Igo, how are you doing today, man?
I'm well. How are you today?
Spectacular.
Thank
Dr. Giles had mentioned before you came on today that you know a lot about the history of Athens. Can you tell me something first of all, tell me something I don't know about Athens.
Well, you put me on the spot there. Athens is rich with history, especially African American history. And there are two individuals that after Reconstruction, and do you know what Reconstruction is?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, tell me what Reconstruction is.
Okay, so Reconstruction, that's after the Civil War, am I correct?
Right.
That's when a lot of the slaves, I learned this in history class. We had the first Black House of Representatives.
Black people, yeah, in the House, yes, in the Senate.
We were sort of kind of getting more interconnected in the society, normal society. It was kind of like a rebuilding after the Civil War because a lot of damage was done
Mm-hmm.
economically
And why was and not to ask you all the questions, but it sounds like you know a little bit about the history. Why was, what happened with the economics?
a lot of the money we were using was put into the war. Am I correct?
Okay, but what happened with our people? Why was the economics? And this is a school teacher in me. Why was the economics affected? What affected the economics for whites at that time?
No more slaves.
Okay, so if they didn't have any slaves, then what happened to the people that were out doing the work?
It dropped by a lot.
Right.
Almost all of it.
And so that was part of the conversation that we're having about why there was a war, right? So if you're taking my laborers and the people that I have working to make money, then what was a lot of people weren't happy about a change of lifestyle, right? So that means that they would have to rethink how they would do business. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
And so after the war, there was an opportunity. You will see that in Athens, there were a lot of schools that developed, right? And so because people knew that education was a vehicle for change, right? It was an opportunity for people to grow. And so with the Freedmen's Bureau, there came the Knox Institute and Jewel Institute. And I have a little known fact, not a lot of people know that Savannah State started here in Athens through conversations, and there were some AME ministers, so the churches were forming. You have shortly after the war and the day of Jubilee, you had two churches that formed shortly after in the next coming years, and that would be First AME Church and Hill First Baptist Church, and both are considered the mother churches of African American community, because out of those churches came other churches. Hill Chapel came out of Hill First Baptist, right? So there were a lot of different things. It became African Americans. A lot of them wanted to grow, right? As the opportunity presented itself, many of them went on and went to school, right? And but there are two individuals, that Madison Davis, who went to the Georgia General Assembly, and then also Alfred Richardson as well. They were like the dynamic duo, both coming from different and had different thought processes, and they really I will tell you, Alfred Richardson, he was kind of a rebel. His house got firebombed and other things. He was shot at and shot because people didn't like the fact that he was representing Clark County at the Georgia General Assembly. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I appreciate the history lessons. I learned a lot. But can you tell us exactly how did you get into this committee? I know that we got Dr. Giles and Sailor Gardner's take, but tell us a little bit about what you think of the Juneteenth Committee.
Okay. So I became a part because I'm a part of Historic Athens. And Historic Athens is an advocacy education nonprofit that focuses on historic preservation. When you think of historic preservation, you think about buildings, but it's so much more than buildings. It's about the people who lived in those buildings, right? It's about telling our story, right? And so, so you're not just talking about buildings, but you're talking about the people, the history that comes along with those buildings, and telling their story properly, right? As you look at your history book, oftentimes it is one-sided in how it's written. And so that's one of the reasons how my position was created. There was a grant by the National Trust that is basically funded a position for African Americans in preservation. You didn't know that was a particular career you could have, right?
No.
So here it is, they're creating opportunities for African Americans to be able to tell a fuller, richer story of American history.
And that would include Juneteenth.
That would include Juneteenth, exactly. And so it was quite appropriate for me to become a part of this committee. And what we need is the community, because the community is who helps tell the story, right? And so we need you to be a part of the planning process. So if you have a group of individuals that have an idea that they would like to present and share with the community, we encourage you to register so that you can be selected to be on the calendar of events, because we have 19 days of Juneteenth that we will be celebrating. And you can go to Athens Juneteenth at gmail.com. That's going to be Athens with an S, Juneteenth at gmail.com. And we need you to complete your survey before March 15th to be considered.
Talking about your knowledge on Juneteenth, why do you think exactly Juneteenth isn't an event or a holiday that's highly celebrated in our culture?
Well, part of it is because we don't know our history. And if you look at the school system and you look at, and so that's why it's important for us to take it upon ourselves to learn, right? To take time and learn. We have Google, which our ancestors didn't have, right? So we have all this knowledge at our fingertips. We just have to take the time to be inquisitive and wonder why. How did this come about? Well, who were the people that looked like me that were a part of the story? Where are they, right? And so that's why we need young preservationists and individuals who are curious about history to get involved, right? And so that's why it's so important for individuals who are we want to just tell a fuller story, right? So
Thank you. We'll continue after these messages. Welcome back to Education Matters, the official voice of the youth. My name is Green, joining me are my co-hosts,
Ethan McKenzie.
and Alan Green. Before we continue today's show, I will have our Scholarship of the Week sponsored by Athens Tech. The scholarship today is the Tori Nicholas Cray Scholarship from Albany State University. This scholarship is awarded to an Albany State University student in memory of former ASU employee, Mr. Tori Nicholas Cray, who has faithfully served students in his role as an academic advisor. The qualifications are that the applicant must be graduating from Central High School in Macon, Georgia, the applicant must be a freshman, and the applicant must have a minimum 3.0 GPA. This has been your Scholarship of the Week, sponsored by Athens Tech. Okay, Ms. Gardner, my question for you is, after this year's Juneteenth celebration, are there any plans to continue going forward and make this a tradition in Athens?
Yes, I think that this is just the start of a wonderful relationship between ACC Gov and our community to really keep the celebration coming and keep the committee. I'm sure that will evolve into maybe different stakeholders and community members, but to be sure that we're celebrating and having a localized event behind Juneteenth. It could change depending on the committee and the format. So this year the committee chose the 19 days of Juneteenth. So that could change, but no, Juneteenth has been made a federal holiday. I know internally we're trying to figure out how we can really make this more widely celebrated and an experience for everyone.
How is ACC Gov contributing to the holiday event and the committee?
So the Mayor and Commission of Athens Clarke County has allocated the funding for this process. So they have prioritized Juneteenth as something that they want to see happening in our community. And so we have a $20,000 bucket of funding that we can access. And of course, that's why I think I'm here and our leisure services staff are here kind of to help navigate some of those channels, because with government funding does come government procurement processes and ensuring that we're able to get the folks that are looking for funding for their specific Juneteenth events and programs through the process that we know that ACC Gov local government kind of has in place with our procurement.
Say if I had an idea for a program, how would I go about proposing it and introducing it to y'all?
Great question. So that's where the survey comes into play. This survey is for exactly that. For anyone who has an idea for an event or for a program or something that they would like to see happen around the 19 days of Juneteenth. And that comes to our planning committee. And then once the survey closes, we'll get together as a group and go through and see what the submissions are. The plans are to have a calendar made. And currently, right now, if you go to accgov.com/Juneteenth, that's the landing page that you can find the survey, a little blurb about the community and the members. And when folks are looking for more information, there's the Athens Juneteenth @gmail.com if they have questions.
But say if I had an amazing event in mind, is it guaranteed that it will come during the 19-day celebration?
So it's not guaranteed. However, we do want to be sure that we're giving everyone an opportunity to have an event, depending on the needs of the specific event, whether it needs funding or whether it needs like staffing support or whether it just needs a physical location. The committee, this planning committee will take all of those different pieces into play and kind of plan out the logistics of how we can support everyone that has proposed an event or an idea.
So it's kind of like a selection process.
Yes, there will be some form of a selection process just depending on, so let's say you put forth your awesome event idea for on June 19th, but then also Dr. Giles' event is also on June 19th, and so is Hope's event. So we're going to have to figure out how we can make sure that we are doing something that fits the needs of everyone that's submitted an idea, but also how we think that we can plot that out more.
And make sure that people can attend, because if you have two events going on at the same time, you're creating a situation where the community has to choose.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to make sure that people attend your event and attend it, people come out and attend together so that it is a successful event, right? So we want to make sure that we spread it out so that individuals can choose and pick events throughout that period of time, the 19 days, and so it can be equitable, okay? All right.
So basically what you're saying to us, is that the guarantee would be if, let's say, like you said, if there's an event already on June 19th and you're trying to apply for an event on June 19th, it might get pushed back to like maybe June 18th or any day before that.
So in the survey, there's opportunity for anyone to give secondary and maybe even like a third option for when you would be willing to host your event. So for exactly what I hope identified, if we don't want folks to have to compete, we want to be able to spread out the 19 days so that every single day from June 1st through June 19th, there's an opportunity for our community to come together and learn or attend a play or hear a reading or maybe, have a cleanup at Brooklyn or a gospel program or, whatever the events that are coming into the fold. We want to be able to spread them out throughout the 19 days. And so we would give options in that survey to give a secondary or a third option for those days.
So the events aren't just entertainment, it can also include helping the community?
Correct.
Yes.
We want all kinds of events, not just celebration events, but like we said, educational events, and events that will broaden our knowledge and understanding, not just of Juneteenth, but of African American history, which is American history. So, yes, so it's not limited to just the moment of Juneteenth, but it stretches over the whole arc of our history in this country. And so, yes, there are some things planned where there are fireworks and food, but there are also other things planned where there's lectures that people can attend and
Cleanups.
Cleanups.
Service days.
Mhm.
cleanups, performances, a whole range.
We want our community to get creative.
Yes.
So what exactly, has there been any people that have already have already filled out their spots for Juneteenth, or is it still like all open? Like, has there been anyone to put their spots in already?
Well, there have been people who have submitted the survey. One of them was Town and Gown Players. They're going to have an event in their Founders Garden. And the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, which I belong to, we've submitted an event, which is like more of a lecture, educational event.
Our last question for the three of you nice ladies is our essential question, and that is, why does education matter? I'll start with you, Ms. Gardner.
Oh, education matters so much. I think education, when I think about education, I think about just the curiosity that comes from learning, and I think it doesn't have to be formal, it doesn't have to come from a textbook, it doesn't have to come from a school. I think that education happens in so many different ways, and it's important, I think.
Back in the time of slavery, enslaved people were forbidden by law to learn how to read. Why is that? That's because education makes you a larger person. It enlarges your world. It enlarges your possibilities. Education is more than just about training for a job or getting a piece of paper. Education is what makes us more human and more able to grasp and understand and hopefully change our world for the better. So education is essential.
And finally, Ms. Eichelhart.
Education, we should be all life learners, and that means that we need to take opportunity to grow. It gives you an opportunity to grow. It gives you an opportunity to look at things differently. And it also gives you an opportunity to connect with people who you normally may not be in your inner circle, may not be in your neighborhood, but individuals who share in a commonality. And it's also, like I said, it changes thought process. And it gives us an opportunity to see things in a different light. So we need to grasp every opportunity that we can, and each part of our life, we need to continue growing and continue to seek knowledge, so that we can be a better person.
Thank you. Thank all three of you. I thank all three of you for your time and coming on here to promote the Juneteenth celebration, and I hope it all goes according to plan. And thank you for listening to Education Matters, the official voice of youth. Education Matters is sponsored by the Clark County School District, Ellison's Professional Services, and MeURadioAthens.com. If you missed any portion of this program or would like to hear it again, it can be heard Monday at 5:30 or Thursday at 10 a.m. on MeURadioAthens.com. Or you can play it on demand from our YouTube channel, Education Matters Network. Education Matters is a production of the High School Completion Initiative. Goodbye.